Hello, Lappers. Today I'm in my bed for this session because it's so cold in my apartment and I need to be comfy. Okay, so today our topic is taking data, um, which goes along very well with our lecture that we had last week about writing and reading goals, because you kind of need data in order to create a goal, and then you also, once you have a goal, need to take data in order to track the goal to make sure that the kid is meeting it or not meeting it, um, and adjusting from there. Excuse me. Okay, so the first question is, what is data and why do I take it? And my answer for you is that it is a collection of facts gathered for analysis, and it can either be qualitative or quantitative. I'm sure you guys have heard those words before, but just as a refresher, qualitative data is going to be more of a description of what you're seeing or hearing, and then quantitative is just straight numbers. And good data is going to have a mix of both. So why do you need to take data? Like I said before, to help yourself track progress, and show the child's progress. So you're going to need data in order to write the goal, but also to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to meet it and that you're doing what you need to help them meet it. It also shows their parents, or your boss or their insurance progress. Um, those people, in an ideal world, wouldn't matter, but they do realistically. So yeah, you do need to be able to show the parents, um, at least once a year at IEP meetings in the school, or if you're in the clinic every few months, and just be like, hey, this is what we've been working on. This is how they were at the beginning. This is how they are now, so that they can see that what you're doing is actually helping their kid and worthwhile. Your boss showing them, hey, I'm actually doing my job. And then, of course, insurance, especially in the hospitals and in like private practice settings. Insurance is such a bother, but you have to be able to show them that what you're doing matters and that the client actually needs the services that they're getting, because they can be kind of tricky, and you'll learn all about that if you decide to go into speech language pathology, and get your master's. And then it also gives you a set number for when a child is ready to graduate speech, because sometimes it can feel like they're going to stay there forever because um, maybe they aren't reaching their goal, or maybe it's just feels like a big deal when you have a kid and you're just unsure of when to stop treating them. And if you have that goal set, it can help you give yourself the confidence of, okay, now that this child is doing this and this and this, like that's what they need to do to graduate. And you can kind of work towards that overall goal and set smaller goals in order to get there. And then once they kind of reach that top goal, then you can say, okay, they've now caught up, they're all good, they're ready to go. So getting started, let's go ahead and get into what kind of data you should be taking. So the first thing that you need to consider is, what is your goal? Um, so this is kind of going off of, once you already have the goal set, what kind of data should you take? So that's going to be whatever your goal is. So I know I popped into one of Faith's sessions this week, small groups, because they were unsure how to write a goal. They were writing it like, oh, well, in 4 out of 5 two-word phrases, they'll make 5 two-word phrases. And it was just kind of worded weirdly. And we said, hey, you know what? This might be better written as, in a 15-minute time period, they're going to make at least 5 two-word phrases, any phrase. to communicate their thoughts or needs. And so that goal is going to look very different than a goal that's like, oh, they're going to produce these words this many times accurately. And so you really need to read your goal first in order to determine, okay, this goal is in a 15-minute time frame, so I need to sit down and I need to be checking every single time they make a two-word phrase so I can track how many two-word phrases they're making over a 15-minute time period. And so that's just kind of counting during a time frame versus putting checks and X's of, okay, this was right, this was wrong, this was right, this was wrong. So first and foremost, you should be looking at your goal to determine what are you trying to measure, and that'll give you a really good starting base. Qualitative versus quantitative data, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to want a mix of both. It helps so much when you're writing a report to be able to give set numbers like, okay, in this 15-minute time frame, this kid made 12 two-word utterances. That quantitative data is so important, and it really helps paint a picture for everyone reading that report. But qualitative data also has a huge role in that, because if all of their two-word phrases are milk please, water please, food please, that's going to look so different than like want milk, like water, because they're having those need words, or if they're having verbs and nouns and a good mixture of words, if they're using morphemes. So if they say puppy fell past tense or puppy jumped past tense, that's totally different than saying like puppy jump, because it's giving more information. It's using tenses and morphemes, which show that the child is progressing their language even further. So it's very important to have a mix of both. The next one is keeping in mind how much support are you giving and how much support you're supposed to give. So we talked in the last video about prompting and how there's different kinds of prompting, right? There's like visual, verbal, tactile, and there's also number of prompts. So if the child in the goal, it says they're able to get 1 or 2 prompts, then you need to be tracking when you gave the prompt, what kind of prompt it was, and then every single time you need to be writing down, okay, he got 3 wrong, I gave him a verbal prompt. He got 1 right, 1 wrong, I gave him another verbal prompt, and then he did the rest of them right. Because you need to be tracking how many prompts you gave, how much support it was, so that you know that you're not just, giving him every single answer, you're not giving him too much support, because that is really important for meeting the goal that they are doing it with the accurate amount of prompting. Same thing for number 4. How are you tracking your support? There's lots of different ways to take data, which is going to be kind of the overarching theme of this lecture. But yeah, you just need to have a set thing in place of how you're going to track everything. Number 5, when are you going to take data? Sometimes this is going to be written into the goal, like during breakfast time, during dramatic play. But a lot of the times during like actually working in the schools or in a clinic, you aren't going to have that set like during breakfast time over a 15-minute period, you're going to do this. So you just need to kind of think, okay, does this kid need to warm up first? Should we do something else at the beginning of the session and then go into the testing? Or does this kid tire out halfway through? So we need to be doing all of our testing at the beginning, and kind of think about what's going to benefit everybody. And then number 6, when has the child met the goal? And that's going to be tracking accuracy or whatever you're trying to measure, and then the support, and also over the amount of sessions. So if they get the accuracy with the support for 2 sessions, and then they have to get it for the 3rd and they don't get it for the 3rd, You have to start over. The child hasn't met that goal yet. They need to meet it 3 in a row. So here also, we're going to go a little bit more into qualitative and quantitative data. So qualitative definitely needs to be taken the first couple of weeks, especially at Rosa Parks, because you're kind of monitoring all of the kids to see if any kids stand out for having language needs. And you're going to be communicating with the teachers and the coaches of, hey, do you notice anybody who seems to be having any issues? And then you're going to be watching and taking notes of, hey, the teacher asked this kid a question. He didn't respond to any questions the whole day. And so qualitative data is especially helpful at the beginning when you're trying to track and understand and get a feel for everybody in the classroom. But then also, as I mentioned, throughout the semester, anytime you think something should be noted, it's always helpful to have more information rather than less. And then also observations that you may make, but you don't have numbers on. So maybe during recess time, you notice that the child is sitting by themselves underneath the slide. They're not talking to anyone. That's something really important that you should be noting, even if you can't say like, oh, they sat under the slide for 7 minutes. But you can say, hey, they were sitting under the slide and not talking to anyone. That's not really typical for preschoolers. Quantitative is going to be after the goal is set for sure, but also it can be taken at the beginning if you just want to like kind of check yourself, and especially in the school and clinic setting, of course, you're going to be taking quantitative data before the goal is set. But at Rosa Parks, it's more qualitative. And quantitative is just going to be those checks, minuses, writing down numbers, exactly what they're doing, which is really important for tracking information. And then you're going to be including how many opportunities were given, how many times they took the opportunity, and what kind of help you gave them. And that's going to depend on the goal, right? So we mentioned last week in the lecture that we were going to get more into this of what exactly is an opportunity, because that's sometimes not very clear. And we'll get into that in just a minute. So types of support, I mentioned earlier, there's visual, auditory, tactile, but there's also maximum, moderate, minimal, and independent. So when you're writing the goal and reading the goal, you might see all of these different terms. And then when you're applying it, you need to know exactly what they mean. So visual is you might have like a picture and you can point to something on the picture in order to give them a clue. So for example, you might ask them, what's going on in this picture? And they might like start talking about how there's a window or something, but you kind of wanted to know like the overall thing, like maybe they're cleaning or whatever. And so you might like circle your finger around like the main idea of the picture in order to draw their attention to what you want them to be talking about. An auditory cue could be something like the language facilitation strategies, right? Like repetition, revision, saying, oh, like I heard you say 2 words, I wanted you to say 3, and just giving them like a verbal clue. And then tactile is going to be actually touching them. So for sounds, when you're working on speech sounds, tactile can be very helpful, like helping them put their hand on their throat to feel their vocal cords buzzing. For kids with cleft palates, helping them feel like the nasality. And there's also different types of tactile cues that can be used for learning speech sounds. For kids with Down syndrome, for example, you can give them tactile cues like if you put your finger here, that's an M, this is an N, this is an S, right? And then the types of support like max, mod, min, independent. Independent obviously is going to be totally on their own with no prompting whatsoever. Minimal usually you're going to have to see it defined either in the goal itself or in a queuing hierarchy that goes along with the goals. So minimal usually is like 1 to 2 prompts, and mod is like 3 to 4, and max is like 5 or greater. But that should be lined out very clearly for you. Um, and you shouldn't just be writing like, oh yeah, I gave them mod support without like anything to back that up. So when to take data, data is a snapshot. You don't need to be taking it constantly, but you should have data for everything that you're doing. At Rosa Parks, that's going to look different because we usually set aside like, okay, during this time, you should really be focusing on data. But if you can, try to like track it and see if it changes over different settings. But especially like in the clinic and during the school settings, anytime that you're doing something different, especially if they have multiple goals, you need to be taking a snapshot of data for everything that you're doing. My supervisor in undergrad always told me that, like, you don't need to be taking data for every single second of every single session, because you are going to be providing support, but you should be taking some kind of data at some point, so that you can track their progress. And some people prefer to take data the whole time, and some people prefer to kind of train them on the words. And then at the end of the session, maybe they have a goal for expanding or answering WH questions. So maybe at the end of the session, maybe the whole session, you work on what a WH question is, how to answer it, you practice. And then towards the end of the session, you read a short story, just like a couple of sentences, and then you ask them 5 WH questions and see if they can answer them. And that would be your data. So yeah, here at the end of the activity is a good time, but also if it's laid out for you in the goal, definitely take your data during that time for breakfast, recess or free time, small group periods, reading periods, dramatic play. And feel free to take more data than it says in the goal. More data will never hurt anybody. So how to take data, because it can be kind of weird to determine what to do. You can do it a variety of different ways, right? So you could have physical objects. So I've done this before where I was working on speech sounds with a kid in undergrad, and we were working on L words, and I had like 10 cards, picture cards, and I would hold up a card and he would pronounce it. And if he got it correct, I would put it in one pile. And if he got it wrong, I would put it in another pile. And then at the end of the session, I was able to just go back and count how many cards were in each pile and be like, okay, he got 6 words right, 4 words wrong. And then I could very easily write 6 out of 10 in his like SOAP note for that week. You could also do it with tokens. So I think it's Super Duper has like a token tower, and basically it's like every time they get a word right, you put a token in this little thing and the kid can watch it grow. And so that's really rewarding and motivating for them as well. And you can kind of adjust the slider to a certain number. So you could have it at like 5, 10, 15, 20. And so then you can count exactly how many tokens are in it based on where the slider's at. And so that's like kind of a double positive, right? Because it's also a motivator. So that's how you could use physical objects. You could also do it on paper. So I mentioned before, you could write like a check if they got it right, a minus if they got it wrong. So with my earlier example of answering WH questions, maybe you ask like, who was cleaning? And they say, the dog, right? And that obviously was incorrect. You could put a minus. Or if you asked who was cleaning and they say the mom, you could put a plus sign or a check, whatever symbol you want to use. I would just be careful with this because kids catch on pretty quick, and some kids take things very personally. And so if they see a bunch of minuses and they know that they're not doing very well, it can be very discouraging for them. So if you are going to take data that way, make sure you have a clipboard and you're holding it up so they can't see what you're writing, just because you don't want them to take it too personally. And same thing for the tokens. If you are going to do the correct pile versus incorrect pile, try to make it as subtle as possible. Or if you're going to do it with the tokens, you can put one in every time they get it right. You could put it in like maybe there's a top side and a bottom side. You could make sure whichever way it's facing is a clue, whatever works for you. You could also take it on a computer. I had a supervisor my first semester of grad school who was super into using computers during the session, because when you do it on paper, you then have to go to the computer and put all your data in the computer afterwards anyway. And so she was a huge proponent of why waste the environment, or you know what I'm saying. Why waste the paper and hurt the environment, and waste your time when you could just put it directly into the computer as the session's going, which I kind of agree with. Like, I think that it's definitely a viable way to take data. It has not been my favorite way to take data, but it is nice because then you can see, usually you can type faster than you can write. For me, like, I have to look while I'm writing or else my writing goes all over the place, but I don't have to look when I'm typing. So it's easier for me to take a mix of qualitative and quantitative, because I can just pull up an Excel spreadsheet and I can be like typing, hit enter, typing, hit enter, and watch the kid the whole time as I'm typing data. So I get more information, which is nice. And then it's easier to organize it when it's in an Excel sheet. But again, that isn't best for every kid and every population. Like, it's a lot harder for like early intervention than it is for older kids, because the older kids are able to sit at the table, and so it's easier for you to use it, versus if the kid is running and moving around, it's not realistic to be carrying your computer everywhere, but it's a lot easier to carry a clipboard. And then finally, you can use a recorder. I've done this before if the goal is like a language sample. So maybe the goal is to increase their overall MLU, which is mean length of utterance. So that's going to be depending on either how many words they're saying on average per sentence, or how many morphemes, which is the words plus all of the like suffixes, right? So for example, an utterance of the dogs were playing is 4 words, but because dogs had an S, you would give them another point, and because playing has ing at the end, you'd give them another point. So that would be 6 morphemes, but 4 words, because there's 2 suffixes in there. And actually were might even be one too. So yeah, that's and then you would divide that by how many sentences they say. So if they say 10 sentences and on average they have 3 words per sentence, or 3 morphemes, whatever you're measuring, at the beginning, and then you want to increase that to 4 or 5, you could use a recorder to take a language sample, put it in a SALT, and then go from there. So some different ways to take quantitative data. So I mentioned this before. You could do the plus minus, a yes, no, but you could also do a 1, 2, 3 system, which I really like to do, because it gives more information for you and the person reading the report. I prefer to do this mostly when I'm working on speech sounds, because for language goals, it's kind of, I mean, I guess you could use it this way, but it's kind of one way or the other, right? Like, they either had correct grammar or they didn't. But for speech sounds, they could have something kind of in between, right? So say they make an SH sound when they're supposed to be making an S sound. So in this case, a 1 would be SH because they aren't making the sound. A 3 would be an S sound because they are making the sound. But the 2 would be something somewhere in between, right? So They aren't making an SH, they aren't making an S, but they're kind of getting closer. Sometimes that gives you more information than just the plus or minus, because if you have, they said it correctly in 2 out of 10 opportunities, then that's going to look like, okay, they're really struggling with this. But then if the next week they have 2 3s, 5 2s, and 3 1s, then you can see that they're making progress. Even though they aren't perfect, they're getting closer. And so that can be a really useful tool to show to all those people we were talking about earlier, like the parents, your boss, the principal, the teacher, whoever needs the information, insurance. You can show that they're making progress, they just aren't quite there yet. And so that can be very beneficial, just to track. Yeah. So here's a non-language example, just because sometimes it can be easier to understand when it's something you already have a grasp of. So let's say you're shooting at baskets with a basketball, and you shoot the ball 5 times and it goes in 3 times. So you had 5 opportunities because you shot it 5 times. It went in the basket 3 times. So you would write your data 3 out of 5, right? Because you shot it 5, it went in 3. So in a language example, by whenever, Emily will use 2 to 4 word utterances to express her wants and needs, protest, or comment in 3 out of 4 opportunities, given no more than 1 prompt. Example, a direct verbal model over 2 consecutive sessions as measured by clinician data. We talked about this last week in Faith's session, and so I want to reiterate for everybody. If you ever see EG here, that means example. So it technically could be anything. It doesn't have to be whatever follows the EG. If it says IE, it has to be whatever is written there. So if this was written as IE, you could only give them a direct verbal model as a prompt. But because it says EG, that's just giving an example of, oh yeah, like you can give 1 prompt like a direct verbal model, but it really could be anything. So just so that's clear for everyone. So what is the opportunity, right? We've talked about this. What makes an opportunity when you're just asking somebody to express their wants or needs or to comment on something? So first of all, I would probably rewrite this goal as during a 15-minute period, they'll make this many phrases. But if this was the goal you were given, because sometimes you will be given a goal that maybe is worded weirdly, an opportunity would be, say you hold a milk carton in front of them, or you put it right in front of them and they can't open it, right? And they just kind of go, and are shaking the milk. That would have been an opportunity, right? They have an opportunity to say, open the milk, and they didn't. So that would be an X. They would not get credit for that. You could have like a sticker book and they want a sticker, and you could be giving stickers to the other kids sitting at the table, but not give them a sticker, right? Just hold on to the stickers, but like be looking at them, and they have to ask like, I want a sticker too. And then you would give them the sticker, but that's an opportunity, right? They have to say it. And that might be something that you would need to model for them, right? So you could turn to the first classmate and say, like, say, I want a sticker, and the classmate would say, I want a sticker, and you give them the sticker. And then go to the next kid, say, I want a sticker, and give it to them. And then turn to your kid and just like not say anything and just look at them and see if they'll do it. And so that's one way to do it. Same thing with a toy, and then also with a book. So you could say something incorrect in the story. So you could, going back to the earlier example, say like, oh, the dog is cleaning, and see if the kid corrects you. That's a really good way to get information out of kids, because they'll be like, what are you talking about? No, that's not right. And usually, even from a very young age, they'll tell you that you're wrong. And so those are just kind of ways to create opportunities. And then you can use that in your qualitative data of, okay, I put a closed milk carton in front of them and they just screamed. Or I put a closed milk carton in front of them and they said, open, right? That's totally different things, even though they aren't using the 2 to 4 word utterances. A scream versus one word is totally different. But then also, if they say, I would keep data, even if they say open milk, that's totally different than open the milk, please, right? But open milk and open the milk, please, 2 and 4, they both fall in meeting the goal. So that's why qualitative data is so vital to go along with your quantitative data. And so then for meeting a goal, in order for the goal to be met, they have to demonstrate the target goal skill with the correct amount of prompting over the correct amount of days, right? So usually it's going to be written like over 2 days or over 3 days. So if they get it for 2 days in a row, but not for the third day, they don't pass the goal. They have to do it for 3 days in a row. So it would start over. So if they get it, don't get it, they need to get it, like after that. And then that can be just over school days. So if they get it on Friday, Monday, Tuesday, that counts. Even though they didn't get it technically on Saturday and Sunday, you didn't see them. So it's just 3 consecutive days that they're in school. So assignments for this week, all of our videos and scripts are done, yay, and crafts. So if you do need extra hours or if you need to make up any like missed meetings or projects from throughout the semester, just let your coach know and you can do an extra video script or craft for whatever you want. It doesn't have to be something that your group was assigned. You can do something that a different group did that you're just really interested in. But everybody this week is going to be reading the early literacy intervention article and working on the data project, which is going to be pretty similar to the goal project, and that will be linked in Canvas below this video. And then, of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I will see you guys next week. Bye. Oh, wait, I didn't stop.